It's windy on your end.
Oh, that's been fine. I'm gonna put that up.
All right. We want your opinion today. This is really important because what we're talking about today is the great vegan divide, to process or not to process. Ooh. So this is coming from the Vegan Women's Summit, and it's an interesting topic, at least in my mind. It's very interesting because how do you feel about fake meats and processed vegan food? Because that is an industry that really has grown a lot in the last few years. And there is a divide amongst the vegans as to whether or not this is something that we should be doing. So, how do you feel about processed vegan food? I think it's a very interesting question, and we stay tuned. We have a survey that we would love for you to engage in because we want to know your opinion on this. And so this all started from the Vegan Women's Summit, as I mentioned. The very first, I guess, event that they had was a fireside chat with Ethan Brown, who is the founder of the Beyond Meat Company. And so I want to take you through what he talked about, a little bit about the company, and then what he talked about on at the Vegan Women's Summit, and then we're going to just do a little kind of recap on whether or not what are the views on processed meats and processed vegan foods versus the whole food plant-based movement. And you probably hear me talk a lot about whole food plant-based, but there's a whole other side to it. So in so as I mentioned, Ethan Brown is the founder of Beyond Meat Company, and this is a company that has been at the forefront of the processed fake meat or meat substitutes. And this is a company that was started to address four growing global issues that we have. The first one is human health. The second one is climate change. Then there are the constraints on our natural resources. And as animal agriculture continues to grow, the amount of, I guess, natural or raw materials that goes into raising the animals and all of their feed and their water, and then looking at how much they produce, is really putting a strain on our natural resources because there's where do you put the animals, and then what do you do with their waste? And there's not just their waste, but they are breathing and producing methane gases and all sorts of things. I'm not going to go into that here, but it is a strain on natural resources in our world. And then there is also animal welfare and how these animals are being treated. And so when you look at it, so these are the reasons that Beyond Meat was formed to address some of these global concerns. And it was founded in 2009, again by Ethan Brown. And it's basically substituting animal protein with plant protein. They actually launched their first product to the market in 2012, and that was chicken-free strips. And then in 2013 is when the Beyond Burger came in, and this is the first plant-based burger that was sold in the meat section in grocery stores. And this is where Beyond Meat got its visibility, and it really expanded into an international market. in between 2016 and 2018. And so we started to see it. So I think the first time that I saw it and I had Beyond Meat burger was when I was in Los Angeles, and I could buy it at Whole Foods. So we tried it there, and it does have it is fairly similar to, like, if you were having a hamburger. It's, I guess it's as close to a hamburger that you would make out of ground beef, as at least as I have seen. And I can't be a good judge because it's been a long time since I've had a hamburger. But definitely there are, it does have a lot of resemblance to actual meat and hamburger. And then in 2019, they actually went public, and they had one of the most successful initial public offerings, or IPOs, in history. And their stock, I think they offered the stock at $25, and it soared. I mean, it just went through the roof at that time, because investors saw a real future for plant-based foods, and so that's kind of how it got started. But then they started to face challenges after that, and some of the challenges actually came from the vegan and plant-based communities, because there was a lot of criticism that was focused on that health aspect. And we've talked about processed foods on this show, and it is a processed food. So other things have happened. There's been market saturation of the plant-based meat market because they've got competition now. I think Impossible Burger was or the Impossible Company was also kind of close behind the Beyond Meat, and a very similar type product. And there have been other companies as well that have kind of entered into the market. And then there's also the economic challenges with the downturn in the economy that hasn't helped them. And there was definitely also some shift in consumer preferences. And they've also had some supply chain issues and other things that caused them a little bit of frustration. And there is the continuing debate on the healthiness of the processed plant-based meats. And so this is very interesting. So when Ethan Brown was talking at the Vegan Women's Summit, he was really appealing for unity amongst the vegan community, to kind of forget about that purity in the and the infighting within the community about what is the right approach. And so I want to give you a little bit of a flavor for what he said, because it really sparked for me a bit of interest, and made me think about, what do I feel about this approach? Because I don't think it's a simple yes or no. At least for me, it's not. And from my perspective, just thinking about it, if I had my way and it was a utopian world, the whole everybody would be vegan. Okay, everybody. And so, what is vegan? Vegan is 100% plant-based, and no animal products are used for human consumption. Now, I know that that's a utopia, and I'm not expecting that, and I do not have any judgment against people who are not vegan, because everybody has their choice, and there are so many different schools of thought about it, and there's a lot of different things that are in it, and I'm not vegan 100% my whole life either. So what can I say to other people? If you live in a glass house, then you can cast stones, and I'm not that person. So I do understand that everybody has their own preference. There are also everybody's diet and everybody's body is different. So it's not for me to say what's good for you. But I also feel that, would be in trying to move the needle towards more people eating a plant-based diet, the processed meats can be a help. And we'll talk about that a little later. So do you be a purist for only whole food plant-based? Or do you say, hey, at least if we have people eating plant-based processed food, that's moving us closer to that vegan, more people being vegan. So it's interesting, and we'll talk more about that at the end. But when one of the things that Ethan Brown talked about was a little, I guess, what I would call um, a little analogy that he brought into it. And he said, when he goes traveling, he'll go to the lounge at the airport and get some ice. And when the machine dispenses ice, it just says ice on the label. And then you can get water with it. So you get your ice with water. And he said that when you go back to the 1850s, there was entrepreneurs in the US and France that started to actually generate and manufacture ice with refrigeration. And so when they did that, at first they called it artificial ice. And so there was what they would do prior to that, and they did a lot of this in New England in the US, is they were actually cutting ice before they had the refrigeration. They would be cutting ice from the lakes and from the rivers and putting it into the hulls of boats, would put sawdust on it and ship it to the southern states, and also into places like India, where they would use it to cool, and the aristocracy would actually use it to cool themselves on trains and things. And so one of the kings of the ice business in Boston his name was Tudor. And what he found is that when they had the refrigeration, that became a threat to his business. And so he started spreading rumors that the artificial ice was contaminated. And so once that started coming, that killed the industry. And people would say, oh, it's processed, it has chemicals in it. And so nobody would buy the ice. But then after that, they had the Civil War in the US, and there was a blockade between the North and the South, and the ice couldn't go to the South because of that. And so they started, somebody in Florida started refrigeration again. And once they did that, and actually, he said it was to cool the beer. The Anheuser-Busch got the refrigeration going, and they did this artificial ice again to brew the cold beer. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Not that I'm a beer drinker or anything, but what happened when they did that is that over time, so the ice over time, basically what happened is they dropped the name artificial, and it just became ice. And he really feels that that's going to be the same thing that happens to the Beyond Meat and the other companies. Is at some point it's not going to be known as the fake meat or artificial meat or plant-based meat. It's just going to be meat. And now he said that might be for his grandchildren. He said we'll be eating plant-based meat and they won't even think of it as plant-based. They're just going to think of it as meat. So that was his vision that he had for sure. So that I thought that was kind of interesting. And you can think about that yourself. But he also did talk a bit about the fact that within the vegan community, um, that they, the whole thing about the plant-based meats being processed, and he really felt that um, this is kind of that kind of talk is harming the whole community and the whole movement to transition meat away from animals. And so he really was urging the vegan community to really band together and work together for the good of the vegan movement towards more plant-based. So that is kind of the background, and that's what I thought it would be interesting to talk about the whole thing here, because it definitely raised some questions in my mind about what I think. And so I want to know what you think as well about this topic for sure. So, what is processed vegan food? Just in general, there are many different process. So, the processed vegan food industry really is fairly new. It has been picking up popularity, and there's different levels of processing, I would think, but the main things that are processed are the meats. So you can buy chicken fingers and chicken strips, and you can buy turkey burgers or turkey rolls, or they have tofurkey, which is probably one of the ones I know has been around for a long time. So there's all these different processed meat substitutes that are really trying to emulate meats. That you can buy a processed plant-based salmon and plant-based fish sticks. So, any kind of meat you can buy. Then there's also like yogurts, and usually they're out of coconut, but there's plant-based yogurts, plant-based milks. I mean, you hear a lot about the plant-based milk industry has exploded with different things like the almond milk and oat milk. There's rice milk, macadamia nut milk, a lot of different milks. And then there are, other foods, that kind of come into it as well. I'm trying to think. So, like plant-based sour cream, plant-based cheeses. We've heard cheese is one of those things that people say that, I could be vegan except for I need my cheese. So there's lots of different plant-based cheeses out there now, and some of them have more processed ingredients. I know here in Canada, there's a few where all of their ingredients, although it's processed, their ingredients are very whole food based ingredients, and they don't have any additives or fillers or things like that in it. So there's on the spectrum of processed, you have also those that are more whole, similar to the ingredients that you would have if you made it at home. And then there are those that have the different fillers and things like that in them. So you can get a variety. So there's, from the processed to the ultra processed foods. So it's also something you need to read on your labels what you're getting. And so the thought was, and by the way, some of the vegan cheeses are like amazing. At the Vegan Women's Summit, they had a blue cheese that I believe it's called Climax, and it's only they serve it in restaurants. And I believe it actually is in um, like Michelin star vegan restaurants as well. Man, that I don't think you would know the difference if you went up a taste test between that and blue cheese. So there's some really good ones, and I don't know what the ingredients are in that one, but I know there's some good ones that have the more whole food type ingredients in them, and not a lot of ultra processing. But what I find is they're kind of not something I would eat every day, and they are um, expensive. How about I just say that? Because, a small block of a really solid, good plant based cheese is going to cost here in Canada over $10, right? Just for a small piece. And so, like my family, we do eat them, but usually it's like when we're celebrating and doing a charcuterie board or something like that, we'll get a couple of those cheeses. It's not something we have in every day. We do eat, especially now, my kids eat some of the shredded cheese that you can get. And so, if they're doing a pizza or having tacos or something, they'll put some of that on. And it seems to kind of fill that need for having that taste of cheese. And as we move forward, they're getting better and better all the time. Um, I know when I did a summit last year on cancer, and we had some yogurt, plant-based yogurt. And let me tell you that I was shocked at how fast that yogurt went. I'm not a big yogurt fan, but for people who like yogurt, it went really quick. But, when you look at a small tub of it, I think was 7 or $8. And I think if you look at dairy, the prices are a lot more expensive than what you get for dairy. However, the more, if we're going to continue on this trend, the more people who are demanding it, then, hopefully they can refine the processing and get their costs down. That's the other side of it. Now, when it comes to transition, this is where the idea or the thought is that these foods become a transition or a bridge from people to go from a Western diet through to a plant-based diet, so that they have familiar foods to them, and make that shift from eating moving towards veganism less daunting, and have some familiar tastes. So that's kind of the idea in theory. And some of the benefits of the vegan foods is that it does make these foods more accessible to the public, and help if people are challenged, like, for example, the cheese, or, people will say with the meats as well, that they don't want to give up their meats. So that gives you something that you can kind of fall back on. And lots of, you can still have your cheese pizza or whatever by having these processed foods. And they have, pepperoni as well. So, you can get, and lunch meats. I think the lunch meats are behind in terms of their taste and how well they assimilate the meat products, but they're coming along, and the more and more research that goes into it, the better these things become. Then the other thing is there's some I don't really want to talk too much about the nutritional aspects, because I really feel from a nutritional aspect the whole food plant based is really where we should be, and when you're just talking purely nutrition. But some of the foods are fortified in the essential nutrients like vitamin B12, iron, and omega-3 fatty acids, and that was one thing that is put as a benefit. But I would say that that's for me, that's a weak argument, because we've been talking, in some of our other things when we're comparing foods, processed foods, are not the healthiest for sure. So when you're looking at it from a health aspect, I think that's where some of the criticisms would come in, and where I would say that, putting it as a benefit is the nutrition, I would say, is pretty low on the list. But and so when it comes to the concerns and criticisms, definitely the criticism is that it's processed foods. So they can still be high in sodium. We said sodium, fat, and sugar, and other additives are why we should stay away from processed foods from a health perspective. So that still reigns true from the processed foods. But interestingly enough, if you know Dr. Greger from nutritionfacts.org, he actually did a comparison between a real hamburger and a Beyond Burger hamburger. And when he stacked it up, looking at the ingredients and how it stacks up for nutrition, and how much fat and saturated fat and all of that, the Beyond Burger won over for being more healthy than a regular burger. So that was interesting, and you can if you are interested in that, you can go to nutritionfacts.org and check out the comparing a hamburger to Beyond Burger, and the Beyond Burger won in terms of the quality of the ingredients. So I guess you could consider that. And then when you're looking at transitioning, so kind of they've broken it into three levels of transition. When you're first starting out, the suggestion is you may want to rely heavily on processed foods, and looking at like kind of one-for-one replacements between meat and dairy and cheese and all that stuff. I would say, and then you can move to gradually incorporating more whole foods and homemade options as you become more comfortable. And then as you get advanced, then you would really be working on a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. And I'm going to say, I'm going to put like from my viewpoint on that, everybody's different. So I understand that there are people that might go through that process. For myself and my family, I would say that moving away, once you get used to those plant-based foods, I think it gets hard to actually take them out of your diet and move away from the processed foods, because you already have them in your repertoire, especially when you're tired and you don't feel like cooking. To go into the freezer and pull out a couple of Beyond patties, put them in the oven for 20 minutes, and you've got a hamburger. Like hard to beat that from a convenience perspective. And not saying that you can't have it with the whole food, because you just need to be prepped or have your strategy in place and have your meal plan. And then it's easy to do a whole food plant-based diet if you have that in place. But I'm not sure how many people can move between the initial, the intermediate, and then into the advanced stages, or how many people, once they get into it, would stick with what they start with and not get past either the initial or the intermediate stage. That's kind of my question on that one. But I also think that, there is something to be said for the flexibility. And, maybe you move to whole food on the weekdays, and I don't know, Saturday is your day where you have your plant-based kind of processed foods. And so you kind of have a blend of it. And there are lots of people who are very much about whole food plant-based, and others. I'm going to say from a health perspective, yeah, whole food plant-based. I also feel like sometimes if you if you start with the whole food plant-based and you learn that, and that's especially if your goal is to help alleviate any health challenges or to prevent health challenges, then as your body becomes more, if you start with the whole food plant-based, you get used to that, then you can introduce over time as your body becomes healthier, some of those other things into it, like the processed foods on an occasional basis. But I also feel if you do it that way, your palate will get used to the whole food plant based, and you might not appreciate as much the processed foods anymore because your palate has changed. But again, that's just my thought on it. And so, from the community perspective, when you're talking about the vegan community, I think we need to acknowledge that there are different reasons and different beliefs within the community. There are people who are interested in the health, and that's their main reason for moving towards a plant based lifestyle. There are people who the animal welfare is their number one priority. And so maybe they're not as interested in the health aspects. And then, there's also the environment as well, environmental impacts with global warming and I guess the amount of natural resources that are consumed in animal agriculture. And so everybody has a different reason. Like for me, my number one reason was health, but I like all of the reasons why vegan lifestyle suits me. But I'll just I'm going to end with a little story. And I was vegetarian for a number of years, many years ago. I mean, I think I was in my early 20s when I was vegetarian, and I relied heavily on cheese. So when a vegetarian, you still eat the dairy products and eggs probably, but that was it. I mostly ate a lot of cheese. And so when I tried to go vegan, and it just didn't work at all for me. And as a matter of fact, it probably switched me the other way to going back to a Western diet when I kind of tried to make that move. And then 10 and a half years ago, I actually did go vegan, wasn't planning to do it. But at that point, I had already spent 2 months without any dairy or eggs or any other animal products. And I just found that going 100% was way easier for me than trying to go a little bit at a time. But that's me. You might not be the same way. So that I know that not everybody's going to be like that. So then the question for you is, what's your conclusion? How do you feel about this great vegan divide to process or not to process? And we have a nice little survey we would love for you to fill out. There's a link in our comments. Here's the question. What is your stance on vegan diets and processed vegan foods? Are you all for it? Are you somewhat supportive? Are you neutral? Are you skeptical, or are you totally against it? So I would love to hear from you. We want your opinion and your comments, and then we will give you the answers once we get the survey out there and get some thoughts. And please share it with your friends and in your social media group. Love to hear the answer. What is your stance on vegan diets and processed vegan foods? All right. Any questions or maybe some comments today on today's topic? Hey, Kathy.
So I have a question. I think it's really interesting that he almost had to defend his idea. It's almost like, is the perfect the enemy of the good?
Yeah.
Because it sounds like if I've never had The only time I've had one of those burgers, it was years ago. It wasn't this. I was eating with a friend who was vegetarian, and we were eating it at her choice of restaurant, and I ordered some kind of a bean burger, thinking it would be like a hamburger, and I was so disappointed with it.
Yeah.
So when I'm hearing you talk about this burger, I'm like, ooh, I should give it a try and see. You see how it matches up. But I mean, it just seems like if there are people that are very vocal, the vocal minority, they could be really hurting a movement that would save the planet and save a lot of animal lives and things like that. It's interesting to me.
Yeah. Well, and that's kind of where I'm coming from, is that I moved to a whole food plant-based diet. And I'm not going to say, because I'm not the pure one. And I was at the Vegan Women's Summit last week, and I was eating the fake cheese, if you will. It doesn't sound very glamorous when you say it that way. I had the blue cheese, and I had, the cheeses that were out there. It doesn't feel the same to me anymore, because I have been eating almost all plant-based. And I think that there is some balance that you can strike out there. You don't have to be 100%. And I know that some of the research that was done by Dr. Colin Campbell, when he was doing his research on whole food plant-based lifestyle, I think that, being 85 to 90% whole food plant-based is really what you want to strive for. 100% is great, but at least strive for, 85 to 90%. So there is, some room that way for you to have some other foods. I was also reading from one of the books from one of the gut health doctors, and he was plant-based, but was going out for a celebration, and he was going to have a steak as his celebration. And he said, when I had the steak, it didn't have that same celebratory excitement that he thought it would have. It actually made him feel heavy and crappy after. So he had, he kind of decided that, oh, maybe the steak isn't as good as it used to be, or what he remembered. So it's interesting that way. And I think everybody has to make their own choice, but it also reminds me of when you look at smoking, that there was a lot of confusion and infighting about whether smoking was actually good for you or not. So yeah, I mean, I don't think we're helping the cause by the infighting. I think that helps I'll say the animal agriculture, the other side, which would be like the animal agriculture. And it's a small group. The vegan community is still small compared to the general population, for sure.
Yeah.
So we need.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay. So my question is, this vegan meat, like the meat that you're talking about, I want to know what is made of. Is it just plant-based, modified into a meat form? I want to really know what its content is and what it's all about.
Well, I mean, Ethan Brown did talk about that in his thing. I've seen there's I mean, it's not all, he didn't list all the ingredients, of course, but I think that's
Okay.
made from lentils and pea protein. But there are other ingredients in it that, the last time I looked at, maybe I can get that for you, but the ingredients include things that you might not be able to pronounce. And that's kind of the litmus test that's always been there, is that, it's processed when you see ingredients, you don't know what they are. But there
Yeah,
are
that's right.
there are other products that actually have all the ingredients. You can tell what they are. But yeah, I mean, it's not the same as a, like Kathy, you mentioned a bean burger. And I mean, I've had some really good, uh, plant-based burgers, and I have one that I make myself that was a family favorite because, and it's made out of, what is it made out of? Vegetables and millet and pearl barley.
Ooh.
Yeah. So um, the big thing with that one is it's quite soft, so it doesn't have one. It'll fall apart really fast. But my daughter had her friend over who is totally a meat eater, comes from a total meat background, and she asked me if I could make it again one day when she comes over. So
Maybe that can be a Friday favorite.
it could be a Friday
Yeah,
favorite. Yeah. Okay.
that's right.
Let's do it as a
So
Friday favorite.
I was also thinking, I think tofu is actually kind of chunky like meat, and it could be an alternative for most people, for most vegan, and it's actually quite delicious if you know how to like make it into nice dishes and you know make beautiful diets from tofu. We could actually
Ab-
replace meat, and you get that chunkiness and that chewy kind of flavor from tofu as well.
Absolutely. So tofu is a great alternative because
Yeah.
tofu, you can do lots with the texture of tofu. So you can shred it, you can boil it, you can press it. It comes in different consistencies, like there's soft, medium, hard, extra hard. There's the silken tofu, which is quite custardy. So there's lots of different ways that you can do your tofu. And it's all about how you prep it and how you marinate it and everything like that. So that's a good one. The other one that maybe goes needs a mention is mushrooms. Mushrooms are an amazing. They've already got the umami flavor, and they have uh, a texture that really lends itself to a kind of meat substitute. And man, I had there's a couple of I've had them at home, but I've gone to a restaurant here in Toronto that does like a chicken finger kind of thing, and they use oyster mushrooms to for the meat. Man, absolutely spectacular. Oyster mushrooms are amazing for that, and also lion's mane mushroom, and there's portobello mushrooms. So yeah, you can really do a lot with mushrooms as well, and lentils, and the peas, split peas and all that. Well, you can make those, and walnuts is a good one as well. Walnuts with lentils can make a nice burger as well. So there are options. Like, you do not have to have the processed meats to actually have some of these flavors. But they're easy, right? That's the thing, they're easy. It's just like, we can make our own burgers, but how many times do people just get frozen burgers and put them on the grill? Same kind of thing. It all depends on whether or not you want to do the processing. But I will say, if you're there for the health, whole food, plant-based is the way you need to go. And get those nutrients into you, get that all sorted out. And then when you're all sorted out, then if you want to think about having something else occasionally, then it's probably going to be fine. But start by getting your health in order. And for me, I like the just do it, rip off the band-aid and do it. And then once you're used to it and you've kind of got it solidified, then you can make some modifications. But that's just me. I want to hear about you and how you feel about it. So please do the survey, and then we'll be able to later on our show, we'll tell you all about what the results were. All right. Well, tomorrow is in the kitchen, and we'll see. Maybe we'll do a burger in the kitchen tomorrow. I was thinking maybe I should do a Beyond Burger for But I don't know. I'm not sure I want to do that. We'll see. Tomorrow we're in the kitchen. Bye for now. Don't forget the survey.